Hey everyone, my name is Viola and I'm here today with Lukas, and we're going to talk about how we leverage GPT-3 and trained it on our SEO content and expertise to provide a unique web experience for people. And so today we're not only going to talk about why you would want to play with it, but we're also going to talk about why this is a unique way to present your knowledge and a web experience. And so I think pretty much since Christmas, we've been hearing about how marketers can use ChatGPT, how they can use Jasper and other tools to generate content, page titles, meta descriptions, and not one day goes by where I'm not seeing a LinkedIn PDF about the best hacks to use ChatGPT. And I'm all for it. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm using it all day, every day in my work. But I think one part that we haven't discussed as much is how we can actually use these tools to make our own expertise more accessible. And so instead of spinning out more and more content and more information, how can we make more out of the things that we already have? How can we surface them in an interesting way? And a few examples made me interested in doing this with the Flow SEO content. The first example, pretty early on in December, is this one. It's called Huberman AI. Dr. Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist, and he's a hero in the world of biohacking and how to live well. And he has a huge audience and a very, very good podcast. And so someone took all of the podcast transcript and essentially turned it into an interactive experience where you can ask it questions. And instead of pulling it out of the internet, or the database that ChatGPT has, it only pulls it out of the information that comes from the transcript. And so that took the internet by a storm, and obviously every Huberman fan was excited, but also every AI fan was excited of this application. And then the other one is Gumroad founder Sahil trained in a similar way, trained GPT-3 on his book, The Minimalist Entrepreneur, and used that as a way to promote his book. And this was interesting for me because it's not that long of a book, and it made me wonder, how much content do you really need to have in order to be able to train GPT-3 and create a chatbot like this? And so I reached out to my friend Lukas and asked that very question, and we decided to give it a play. And the result is this. It's a chatbot experience, but instead of providing you with general SEO knowledge or SEO knowledge, from Google, etc., it gives you answers based on the Flow SEO blog content. And so I think we have 50, 60 blog posts, probably each 1,000 to 1,500 words. And so probably 50,000, 55,000 words. So not huge, but you can see that he's now able to answer questions, not with SEO advice from anyone or for beginners. It specifically feeds off the topics that we care about: content marketing, B2B SEO, etc. And it's a pretty cute, interaction on the Flow SEO blog, and it's a way better search function than we ever had before. And so today we're going to show you how we did this and how you can consider doing the same for your website. By now, you have probably guessed it. I'm an SEO consultant and an agency owner. I run an agency called Flow SEO, where we specialize on SEO for software startups and e-learning companies. And I'll hand it over to you, Lukas. Welcome to this talk, and thank you for building GPT-3 with me.
Thank you so much, Viola. I'm Lukas, and I'm not an SEO consultant. I'm more a technologist. I am an innovations and solutions engineer at Path Crypto. So naturally, I am quite close to all the new technologies that are coming up. Lately, of course, AI. So I was excited to have a use case with Viola to build a small proof of concept and a small app that we'll dive into a little bit today, using GPT-3 and OpenAI technologies to repurpose content that Viola and Flow SEO already had on their blog.
So today we'll talk a little bit about why we want to leverage AI with your own knowledge and expertise, what are some common typical use cases on your website, and then also how to create your own chatbot experience. So here's the thing, and here's a challenge with SEO and content in general. Out of all the potential customers that you might have, your total addressable market, your ideal customers, only a small percentage is currently actively buying. So out of the 100% of people that could be using your product, it's only 5 or 10% or so that are looking to make a decision right now and are looking to purchase right now. And this is existing demand we can typically capture with transactional keywords, PPC ads, etc. But SEO and content marketing specifically also aims to educate and interact with the 95% of your total addressable market that is not actively buying this very second. And so we aim to make sales easier in the future. We want to create touch point with our ideal customers. We want to build mental availability. That means that when they're ready to buy, they think of you. If you're German and you're looking to buy a car, you probably already know if you want a Mercedes or a VW. And so these two companies are part of someone's consideration set. And so when they're ready to buy a car, these are the companies they're looking at. And today they might also be looking at Tesla. And so Tesla became part of their mental availability. They are part of the brands. They're part of the consideration set that people go to when they're ready to make a purchasing decision. And so with your content, you want to make sure that you're part of that set. And lastly, your content is supposed to create triggers so that people remember, hey, I kind of need a new car, I need an electric car, I need to save fuel, etc. And so you're building those triggers. Now, what all of this means is that 90% of the people are currently not actively buying. 90% of total addressable market could buy in the future. And in order to buy from you, they need to remember you. And who doesn't get remembered is generic, copy and paste, spun out, boring SEO content, walls of text. It's not inspiring, it's not unique, and it's not something that sticks with people. Resonate with people, what they do remember is your expertise and your knowledge. And not only does Google prefer ranking you based on your expertise, experience, authority, and knowledge, it's also the way you stand out, how you become memorable, and how you become a thought leader. And so this is why, yes, we want to get better and more productive in writing content with all of these tools. And they're also a unique opportunity to surface the knowledge we already have in a different way. So I want to talk about 3 typical search experiences that are typically unsatisfying for people and that will not get you remembered. So a typical search experience that people have is generic chatbot on your website that doesn't even know all that much. Even worse, WordPress blog search function that surface the wrong type of stuff, or help docs. And so in that attempt to be creative, playful, and give people the experience that they're expecting now, that we cannot unsee the ChatGPT experience, right? This is what people will want from now on. And so these 3 places are interesting starting points to create something new on the web. Search function, chatbots, and knowledge center and help box. And so if you can make them better, more conversational, more interactive, display your content better, this is what you can hope to get. You can get an improved search experience on your website. You'll have a conversational interaction where people engage more deeply with your content. You can surface content better. You improve engagement metrics if people are in a conversational experience. You can drive users deeper into your website. And moving forward, you'll be able to meet people's expectations because this is how we like to engage with information now. And so you probably already have a lot of content. You probably have blog content, help docs, video transcripts, podcast transcripts, white papers, ebooks, and all this stuff can now be put to use. And so with that, from the why you should do it, I want to go into how to do it. And I'm handing it over to Lukas for the second half of this presentation.
So I want to talk a little bit more about how exactly we built the what I call Ask Flow bot on the Flow SEO website. We are going exactly into how we're gonna repurpose the content, how we're gonna feed the AI with it, and how we then make sure that we get appropriate content and content that's factual based on our pre-existing content out of it. So let's first set a foundation. Viola has both mentioned OpenAI's ChatGPT today, as well as GPT-3. Basically, GPT-3 was out there for a lot longer than ChatGPT, even though ChatGPT is the more accessible one, because ChatGPT basically is a specialized model of GPT-3. So it's geared towards being a conversational AI, a chatbot, basically with a single purpose, acting as a chatbot in the front end that probably all of you know by now. And it's a chat application, and that's it. And it has a vast data set, of course, and it can answer questions in a lot of different fields and areas. But that's what it does. You ask it a question, and it answers it in this chat-style manner. GPT-3, on the other hand, is a general use AI model. And the interesting thing for us in the context of this conversation is that you can customize it, and you can fine-tune it, and you can also access it via an API. So basically, if you want to integrate AI through the OpenAPI products into your own products, then you got to use GPT-3 at this point. 3 is just the current version of it. There will be future ones. But just to set the foundation, from now on, we're only working with GPT-3, and let's dive into it. Let's start with defining the different ways on how you can model the AI and how you can customize it for your particular needs. There are basically 2 different ways. You can fine-tune an AI model, or you can use so-called embeddings, which means you provide context. Let's start with fine-tuning. You can do both independently from one another, but you can also combine them very well for even more accurate results. Let's start with the fine-tuning. Fine-tuning basically just means that you train the AI for a very specific purpose. So you give it a certain data set of sample prompts with sample completions, so sample answers. As a basic example, let's look at translations, for instance. You could give the AI a Spanish sentence and the English translation, and another Spanish sentence and the English translation. And if you then feed the API with enough data, usually they say at around 100 data sets, the AI not starts to pick up, but gets pretty good at picking up what you want from it. So if you give it 100 Spanish sentences and 100 English translations, and you then ask the AI or send the AI another Spanish sentence, it will do a pretty good job of completing it by itself, just because it learned from those examples that you gave it what you want from it. This is fine-tuning, and you can, of course, use that for many more use cases than just translations. Embeddings use a different approach, a very different approach, actually. But that is the one that we used for our example here. With embeddings, you basically give the API context. So you get an answer from one of your users in our example, and you then find the content that is closest to the question. So the content that best fits the question, and feed that content into the AI prompt right away, and basically tell the AI from this block of content, answer this question, and then it will do exactly that and use the context and will not use too much of its general base model, but mostly the content you give it. To do that, you'll need embeddings. Trust me, it's a lot less technical than it looks like here. Well, it's very technical, but I have a good analogy for you. What we did in the first place was to utilize the WordPress API of the Flow SEO blog. In our case, the WordPress API was open, so actually everyone can just scrape the Flow SEO's content and reuse it. You can also close it. That's exactly what I did. I just pulled all the content from the Flow SEO blog and then created smaller content pieces from it. As you see in this example, there is the second row in the content pieces down there is the blog post title, and then I split it up into smaller content pieces of a couple of 100 words each. From that, I then created so-called embeddings. What are embeddings? It's a lot of numbers, as you see here, but you can see those numbers as coordinates. So let's imagine we have a map, like imagine a geographical map, and each of those small chunks of content now generates coordinates. You can see this map as a content map. So if you have a certain topic, it gets coordinates on that map. And probably the other pieces from the same blog post will land somewhere around it on that map. So close by, because they all are related to the same main topic. Let's just use the example pillar pages, our favorite example. We'll have one blog post with 4 or 5 sections. They all have pretty much the same coordinates, pretty close to one another. And if we have another blog post about B2B marketing, this might be on another section of the map, but the individual sections might still be pretty close to one another. Then again, maybe we have a blog post about pillar pages for B2B. So they will likely end up somewhere in between the two in the map example. So we basically, what we do is we send each of those content pieces to an API endpoint that the OpenAPI API offers, and we get back those embedding vectors. It's 4,069 numbers for each of those small content pieces. Those are the coordinates, but they're a bit more complicated than geographic ones. And by doing that and by putting this content on this map, we now have basically content landscape, and we have certain areas that cover certain topics. And in between those topics, you might have subtopics that are somehow always related. So what we can do now when we get a question in our app that a user submits, we can create a similar coordinate for that question. So a user now asks, are pillar pages worth it? And by creating those this embedding for this question, we will end up with coordinates that end up somewhere in our pillar page territory over here. And therefore, we know where this question belongs on the map. We can then go ahead and see what's closest to our question and can therefore pull the appropriate content pieces out of the map into our app. So we know the user asked about pillar pages. This blog post or these individual content pieces from that blog post are probably best suited to answer the question. And then from there, we can go into designing our prompt. At this point, we haven't yet sent anything to the actual AI. We created embeddings, which is a one-time thing, but we're yet to send the question to the AI to then get our AI response. And that's what we're doing here. We are designing our prompt to be most effective in giving us the answer that the user wants to hear. Now, prompt design is a scientific topic by itself. We could probably have an hour-long conversation just about that. But I'll give you a little bit, some basic rules that are usually helpful also, by the way, when you're using ChatGPT. When you're experimenting with ChatGPT, it makes a huge difference to do some research on how to best design prompts. The quality of the answers can have leap years in between them if you just make some basic tweaks to your prompts. So let's look at our example again. In our example, we give the API a little bit of a prefix. Whenever you enter a question on the Flow SEO website, we put this question in a certain frame, and you see that frame here. It has a prefix, it then has the context, and only then you see the small question that, in this case, our user put into the field. Should I build pillar pages? Yes. I guess that will be the answer. We'll see. What we do is we first give the AI some limitations. We tell it to act as an SEO consultant because that's who we are. So we want to have the API speak on our behalf. We also tell it to make sure that it answers the question truthfully. So it's not too creative in its answer. And we also ask it to be able to say, I don't know, if it doesn't know. And that leads, for example, to when you ask on the Flow SEO website for the best bolognese recipe out there, it won't tell you because it doesn't know, because we don't have the context in the Flow SEO blog at this point. The third thing you have is you have separators. In this case, I used hashes. They usually work quite well to separate your prompt sections a little bit. Then we have the context, and we actually label the context here. We tell the API exactly from now on, like in this section, we will give you context. And in the next question, as you see, we then have a Q question and an A answer. And we leave the space after the answer empty, so that the AI can see, all right, that's probably where they want me to continue. So we talked about how we get the context earlier. We create the embedding for the question, so we know which content pieces are relevant to the question. We then take the content of those content pieces and we basically just paste it in here. Now, you only see one sentence here, but we usually use the entire space that the AI gives us. You have a certain limitations as to how much text you can send to it, but we usually send around 1,000 words of context so that the AI then has a little bit more to work with for the answer. So now we're ready to send our query to the AI and await the answer. We actually used exactly this example and asked it, should I build pillar pages? And we got a response. Actually, we even got multiple responses because we can still play a little bit with the GPT-3 API settings here. And if you read those two answers, they are a little bit different. The first one you'll see sounds a little unsure and a little vague, and definitely leaves some room for interpretation. The second one is a lot more confident and probably also has a little bit of creativity in it. Maybe it has, maybe it doesn't. What's the difference here? In this case, we looked at one very specific API setting that the API has, which is called temperature. And what temperature does is it tells the AI how creative it can be and how much randomness it can put into its answers. As you see at a temperature of 0, there is basically zero room for interpretation. It just takes clear facts from the context we gave it, and even that it's not quite sure about, so it says it depends. At a temperature of 0.7, it actually answers the question in a confident way. It still pulls that information from the context. However, the higher you go in the temperature, the more likely it is that it might also mix in some random information from its base model and base knowledge. So at a temperature of 2 actually, which is the highest that you can set, you might get some unpredictable answers, and it might sound super confident, but it might actually not be truthful anymore. There might be information in there that it pulls from nowhere. We don't know where. So you definitely want to make sure that your temperature is maybe not too low, but also not too high. So you can be sure that the answers you get are still quite close to the actual content that you gave as context. To reiterate, how did we build Ask Flow? We used our own content. We used the existing content from the Flow SEO blog, pulled it through the WordPress API, and just split it up in chunks, a couple of 100 words each, which we then created embeddings for, the coordinates on the map. So for each of those content pieces, we then knew where it belongs on our content map. This is a process you only have to do once. Once every time you get a new content piece, you create the embeddings, and then you have them stored somewhere. And now, every time a user uses the Flow SEO input field on the website and asks question, we then pick the embeddings closest to that question and hand it over to the AI as context. And we get contextual response that is factual based on our existing content. And that's what we repeat. Every single time you use the bot on the website, that's the process we go through for that.
Part of the reason why it's beautiful to work with your own content and your own expertise is that you probably trust it, and you want the answers to be in such a way. And of course, now in the whole debate around these like chat experiences in Google and Bing, we're also talking a lot about using references. And so there's 2 screenshots here. One is from Bing directly on the left side, and the other one is on the right side, Perplexity AI, which is a similar search experience. And so we pretty quickly realized that even though we know our content and we trust our content, we kind of wanted to display references as well. So for one reason, so that people can see, hey, what type of information from Flow SEO did this answer come from? Like, why is it saying what it's saying? Like, what did Viola and the team say about this? And then 2, from a user journey and engagement perspective, if people like the answer, they want to learn more, they want to engage with it more, they can now click and see, what blog post was this based on, and they can study more. And so maybe you have a sentence or 2 for us on how that was like version 2. It first launched without references, and then we added the references in. And so maybe you can speak to that and let us know, how we got them.
Sure. That, of course, always depends on how you feed your content into the entire model. In our case, as I talked about earlier, we use the WordPress API. So with every one of the small content pieces, we knew its source. We knew where it was from, which of the larger blog posts on the Flow SEO blog. So as we then locate the most relevant pieces on our content map, we order them based on relevance, and we just pick the the larger blog post which is most relevant to the question. In this scenario, we just used the very first one. We could, of course, also list all the ones that went into the context. And you can definitely think that further if you somehow pull in the content differently than through the WordPress API. There are other ways to reference it, but that's how we did it. We used the most relevant content piece and link back to that one.
Nice. So yeah, this is the thing, or this is kind of like the learning or the inspiration that we wanted to share today. Is like, yes, all the different AI tools, writing tools are phenomenal. And again, I'm using them every day and I'm having a lot of fun with it. But I think there's more to do than spinning out content, writing content with these AI tools. They're really a beautiful opportunity to surface content in a new way and create new experiences, and also satisfy, I suppose, the higher expectations that we now have about search functions in general. And so I think using your own blog, your own expertise to create this chat experience is one of the ways to do it. And I hope you feel inspired to play with this as a result of this talk. My email is here. It's my real email. And even though it's been flooded with spam offering me AI content in the last 2 weeks, thanks guys. This is my real email and you can reach me there. And if you want to learn more about, well, obviously SEO and B2B SEO, but also about Flow SEO and our search function, please reach out. And then thank you so much, Lukas, for joining me, and 1, on the adventure, and then 2, even talking about it publicly.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to know more about the specifics of the implementation, how you can do that yourself, or how one could also develop that further, then feel free to reach out to me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the summit. There are some beautiful speakers out there. Thank you so much, Andy and Kyle, for putting this on, and see you inside the Internet Marketing Gold community.